We have Lindsey Powell, followed by Julia White.
Good afternoon, and thank you for taking the time to hear me speak today. My name is Lindsey Powell, and I'm a New York State resident as well as a student at Syracuse University. I also work on a hydrofracking campaign for an organization on campus. I'm an aspiring geologist, and I want to see how the Earth works. I want to learn what the Earth is made of. I want to be knowledgeable and educated, and that is why I'm here speaking to you today. To be educated is to be a leader, to be a teacher, and I am taking a stand as a concerned New York State resident to be a voice for those who don't know how to be or that they can be. You all have been appointed to act in New York State's best interest, so why is fracking such a controversy? Why does the dollar mean more than future generations, my generation, the generation of my nieces and my nephews? Say no to hydrofracking, say no to toxic tap water, say no to air pollution. Why bring a dangerous technique to New York State that has seen detrimental consequences all over the US and just south of us in Pennsylvania? We do not have a solution for this treatment. We know our water treatment plants do not have the technology to treat hydrofracking waste fluid. I don't know about all you or your families, but personally, I would do anything for my family. As one child of 14, I was born and raised to fight for what I believe in, and I will wholeheartedly do so for my family. I have many family members who live in the Southern Tier will be directly affected if hydrofracking is brought to New York State. Maybe my cousin will drink toxic tap water. Maybe my uncle, who is a construction worker, will inhale too much pollution caused by excess trucks transporting hydrofracking equipment. I stand here before you today to take a moment and think about if you would or would not stand up for what you believe in. Hydrofracking, if allowed, will pump more than 800 known toxins and chemicals into groundwater, and perhaps hundreds more of chemicals that are unknown. This is not just affecting one spot in New York State, but every single inhabitant of this state, either directly or indirectly. We need to ensure a clean environment, and that is why I'm here today. The state energy plan is supposed to shape our future, so why are we willing to bring hydrofracking here for a few extra dollars? The impacts of fracking on water and air quality are completely ignored in this plan. This is something that should 100% be announced in the plan. We rely heavily on natural gas, and hydrofracking will only increase this reliance. But the state energy plan's goal is to protect New York State's environment and to shape the future of energy. What will happen in the next 10, 20, 30 years if fracking is allowed? Detriment, consequence, an unhealthy environment that is searching and craving more natural gas. I'm here today to plead to let me learn. Let me become this geologist that I'm aspiring to be. Allow me and other geologists, scientists, activists, allow us to come up with a solution or an alternative to hydrofracking before it is brought to New York State and takes its toll on all of us in New York. Thank you for your time and consideration.
Thank you. Julia White.
Yeah. Apologize, I'm going to be reading from my laptop today. Hi everyone, my name is Julia White. I'm originally from Vermont, but attended Syracuse University for 4 years, now live and work in Syracuse. Before I get started, I would like to thank you for the opportunity to speak today. I would also like to thank all the individuals that spoke before me and those that will speak after me, I actually might be the last one now, for taking an active role in this process of ensuring New York's clean energy future for years to come. As was explained at the beginning of the hearing, New York State's energy plan has 4 main goals. I'm going to mainly focus on the goal to achieve a clean environment in New York State. The plans envision for a massive increase in natural gas use in New York over the next 20 years will make this goal impossible to achieve. Relying on natural gas, especially from fracking within New York, especially from fracking, lost my spot, this is what happens, There we go. Relying on natural gas, especially from fracking within New York or beyond its borders, seriously undermines the goal of ensuring a clean environment. The fallacy that natural gas production can be done safely and will bring forth a clean environment is absurd. All we have to do is prove this is look directly south of New York's border to Pennsylvania. We have seen fracking done, and we have yet to see it be done safely. In fact, time and time again, there have been many devastating consequences that are directly related to fracking. Fracking has resulted in diminished air quality, declining property values, and probably what is the most concerning, toxic tap water. These impacts that I have just stated are completely ignored within the current draft of the plan. The state must look at all greenhouse gas emissions, not just carbon dioxide, if we're serious about addressing climate change. Methane emissions from fracked shale gas seriously undermine any benefits of reducing carbon emissions by converting from other fossil fuels to natural gas. Furthermore, the state cannot meet its goal of reducing greenhouse gas emissions 80% by 2050 under this plan. Despite what gas industries tell us, and apparently what the DEC and the New York State government believe within the current draft, fracking results in significant methane emissions during every step of the process. I could stand up here for hours and tell you about what I believe is inadequate within the current draft of the state energy plan, because I assure you that there's plenty, but I'm not going to. Fortunately, my allies that have been here today have spoken before me, have done an impressive job outlining the different issues within the draft. What I will tell you is that while I am from Vermont, I've built a community of family and friends in Syracuse and across New York for the past 6 years. I consider myself a New Yorker, and that is why I've been at the forefront of the fight to ban fracking here. I fight for the well-being of my community, family, and friends, as well as the well-being of many generations of New Yorkers to come. In your revision of the state energy plan, I urge you, in your revision of the state energy plan, I urge you to turn away from fossil fuels like natural gas and turn to renewable energy resources like wind and solar. I urge you to stop listening to special interest groups and instead listen to the public interests, as well as your constituents that you vowed to represent. Thank you very much.
Thank you very much. So what we will do now is take a break and see if we have more speakers showing up. We've announced that we'd be here till 7. So how about 4:30? We'll reconvene and see if we have more input. Okay, thank you.
Good afternoon. My name's Howie Hawkins. I live here in Syracuse. I was the Green Party candidate for governor in 2010, and I'm seeking the nomination again this year. I have 6 points, and I'm just going to briefly mention them. I've written up the testimony I can leave with you. The first point is, for me, the most important. The goal contemplated in terms of carbon emissions reductions by the draft plan is the 80% reduction below 1990 levels, which was kind of the consensus, and that the U.S. government's adopted it. That comes from the International Panel on Climate Change. At the time when the Executive Order 24 by Patterson was passed or adopted in 2009. But the carbon budget analyses done by people like James Hansen and colleagues, or Kevin Anderson and his colleagues in the UK at the Tyndall Center for Climate Change, say we need to reduce in industrial areas like New York by 6%, between 6% per year and 10% per year. That's between 10 and 17 years. If we're going to avoid catastrophic climate change, stay below the 2 degrees Celsius rise in temperature, which is seen where the point where the tipping points, we go over the tipping points and climate change accelerates beyond reversibility. Fortunately, we have a recent study by Mark Jacobson of Stanford and his colleagues, including many in New York, about how in New York we could go to 100% carbon-free energy in 17 years by 2030. I think that ought to be the goal of the New York State Energy Plan. That's where you should start. And I'll just mention that the projection in the Jacobson study for economic impact is enormous. $600 billion in investment, 4.5 million construction jobs building a clean energy system, 58,000 permanent jobs, payrolls of $18.5 billion per year during the construction phase and $5 billion per year during the maintenance operations phase after it's built. So that's the most important point. If I say nothing else and I run out of time, I hope that stays with you. The plan is interesting, a lot of forecasts, but it seems to me more an adaptation to these forecasts than a very proactive plan with specific targets and timelines. It just seems to need to be fleshed out. That's my second point. My third point, you've probably heard this all day, natural gas is not clean. It may be even worse than oil and gas, according to research by Robert Howarth and Anthony Ingraffia and their colleagues at Cornell. So there are alternatives: ground source heat pumps, passive solar, solar thermal, and sustainable biofuels, where the biochar or carbon residue is put back in the soils and sequestered. My fourth point is nuclear power. The plan seems to imply increased reliance on nuclear power in 2030 when 2 of the plants are scheduled to be retired before then. We have the political leadership of the state pushing for the shutdown of Indian Point 1 and 2. The financial media reports that Fitzpatrick as well as Ginna may be shut down for economic reasons. So this just is not realistic, and I would argue that the plan should plan for the rapid phase out of nuclear power and its replacement by clean renewables. Fifth point, electrified transportation. The transportation needs to be much more developed. The Jacobson study, goes through how an electrified transportation system would look, but it would include the vehicles, trucks, and cars, as well as electrified rails for intra-urban mass transit, interurban travel. We used to have these interurbans between 1900 and 1940 that served upstate cities and towns very well. And then, of course, high-speed rail, which is being discussed. Last point, energy efficiency. That's the cheapest and fastest source of clean energy. This needs to be much more fleshed out with specific targets and timelines. I did see one target of 20% demand reduction by 2025, which is close to what, or in the same ballpark as the Jacobson study, which implies 37% reduction by 2030. But it needs to be fleshed out. And I understand there's been a study of renewable energy and energy efficiency that's not been made public. The public would love to see that study, so I hope you'll release that. Thank you.
Thank you very much. To her, please. Thank you. Peter Swartz. And thank you for coming back, sir. I know you were here earlier.
Thank you for keeping the hearing open today so that people like me working can still participate. I've lived in Syracuse for 40 years, raised a family here, own a home. I still own a home and have worked as an auto mechanic and a social worker. So I have some practical experience in how energy can be used, saved, and can become something that we have some input into the decisions about. 30 years ago, in my home, while we still had solar energy tax credits, we built a solar greenhouse. It's still operating. It's helping heat my house today. And I'm very grateful to NYSERDA and to all the renewable energy policies that had led to that short window of time in 1984 and 1985 when we were able to build that greenhouse. I would love to see those kinds of supports for renewable energy come back. If you think of how many families would be able to use that, even in Syracuse, even though we have a month or so of very dark skies, very cold weather, it still works. There's enough sunny days that this greenhouse is really working for me. So I'd recommend that if we had more support for not only passive solar and solar heating, but also efficiencies, people insulating houses, plugging the leaks, getting rid of the waste. I think we could save a lot of energy, and of course, as people have said, the cheapest energy source is efficiencies. Speaking of efficiencies, at the same time I've been living here, we built additional nuclear plants up north, and we discovered the cost overruns, safety concerns, and problems with nuclear waste. We also discovered that nuclear is not carbon-free. Nuclear plants use uranium, which is mined using huge bulldozers and Euclids that burn fossil fuel, and it's enriched using all kinds of very, very high energy processes. I was one of 9 people in Oswego several years ago when the NRC came to town to have a hearing about possibly building a 4th nuclear plant. I was one of 9 people at that hearing of 300 people. The rest of the people are obviously very pro-nuclear. And I was there when Steve Penn, who's a physicist, professor at Hobart William Smith, spoke up and asked the NRC people if they had ever done a study to compare the cost of energy produced by nuclear power with energy saved by efficiencies. And you know what they said? The NRC guy said, "We don't study efficiencies. We don't know." That was really amazing to me, that a government energy agency would not have that kind of information. I think that's something that we should make sure we have, so that we can just determine whether we can actually practically plan the kinds of things that this energy plan is outlining, which I think are very good goals. Because climate change is not only about the sources and the supply of energy, it's also about the demand and how we tailor the sources and supply to what we actually use it for. It's very silly to use electricity for heat. It's smarter to use solar. It's very silly to use, to try to use nuclear power to boil water to produce energy. And you know, that's what we're stuck with a lot of sunk costs for. New York State can be a leader in smart energy use, and I'd like to see us use the skills and resources of ESF, the efficiency studies that have already been done at the Center of Excellence downtown. I'd like to see all of that information get added to the New York State Energy Plan, so that we have something that really makes sense and can benefit people like me who want to continue to live here in New York State. Thank you very much.
Thank you very much, sir. So now we're going to pause and see if we get more speakers and comments. Shall we, what time is it? 5:45? Can we reconvene at 5:45? And of course, if there's a flood of people that come because it's that time of day, we'll reconvene sooner. But Mr. Swords and Mr. Hawkins, I don't know if you're going to stay for final remarks, but thank you very much for coming. It's really an important part of the process. I know you made a great effort twice in one case.
Your work, and we hope to see it on the web if we can't hear the final stuff.
Well, thank you very much. And
thank you for taking my comments. They were read earlier today. I asked Renee Vogelsang to read them because I didn't have an opportunity, and I wanted very much to be heard. I'm Jean Kessner. I'm Counselor at Large for the City of Syracuse. My committee is Neighborhood Preservation and Environment. In that role, but more importantly, in the role
of elected officials to protect New York, EOPNY. That's a consortium of more than 800 locally elected officials from every county in New York State who advocate on the behalf of continuing the moratorium on hydrofracking until and unless health studies prove that fracking is not harmful to human or environmental health. EOPNY will be filing longer comments separately within the deadline, but I'm here today to speak on behalf of the organization, and I am co-coordinator of that organization. Our view of the state energy plan, which in one word is that it is lacking. While setting forth an admirable goal of 80% reduction in greenhouse gases from the 1990 levels by 2050, the plan lacks a strong roadmap for how to get there. It sets no benchmarks or clear steps, and inexplicably, the plan forecasts only anemic growth in renewable sources of energy. Instead, it actually promotes widespread expansion of natural gas. It actually describes natural gas as a clean fuel. Natural gas is a fossil fuel, and burning a fossil fuel contributes to climate change. Clean fuels are renewable, wind, hydro, solar. And according to this plan's own documentation, New York State more than doubled its output of renewables between 1990 and 2012, renewables in wind and solar. And that's a far bigger gain than any other power source in that same time. And although there are some good initiatives in the plan relating to renewables, we need to be more specific and we need more significant commitments to expanding the role for renewables. Now, contrary to this, unfortunately, the plan predicts that natural gas production in New York State will triple by 2030. That's intimating that that New York moratorium on fracking will be lifted. It indicated that production may well be even greater in the state if permitting difficulties are reduced. Permitting difficulties for hydrofracking are reduced. Further, the plan promotes increased infrastructure for gas transmission and distribution, a misguided use of our state's resources and investments. Fracking is not clean. A significant and rapidly growing body of science shows that fracking poisons water, air, land, and it contributes to climate change. It releases methane, a potent greenhouse gas, which brings me to my next point. Just what are our goals here? What are we trying to do? Again, this plan affirms New York's goal of reducing greenhouse gas emissions by 80% from the 1990 levels by 2050. Yet this plan only commits to measuring one greenhouse gas, carbon dioxide, before 2030. This ignores methane, which is 34 times more potent as a greenhouse gas over 100 years and 86 times more so over 20 years. Significant amounts of methane are leaked during the gas drilling and fracking processes and in the transportation of natural gas. New York needs a plan that charts a course for the future, that sets aggressive targets for production of renewable energy and for greater energy efficiencies economy-wide. A plan that tightens building codes and ups the standards on appliances and aggressively enforces those rules. We need to set our sights high and lead the nation away from its dependence on fossil fuels. This will set us on a brighter and healthier plan for the future, and it will create far more jobs than continued reliance on dirty fossil fuels. Thank you.
Thank you very much. And thank you for your persistence in coming. And
Thank you.
And I don't want to say anything disparaging about Ms. Vogelsang, but it was good to hear it straight from you.
Thank you
She
very
did her
much.
best job, but thank you very much.
Thank you. I care deeply about this. I have 4 grandchildren.
We'll pause until we get speakers. Thank you. Right. Thank you, Mr. Hewes.
Thank you. Thank you, everyone in attendance. Thanks, Stephanie. Good, good. This is the woman that taught both of my kids math.
Math is good.
Math is good, yes.
We're not here to we don't express opinions. But I understand the sentiment.
Yeah. I wish my students were better at math. I teach, so it's been a hectic day. So, you want to begin here?
Yes.
Okay.
Thank you.
So, my name is Don Hewes. I've been a resident of New York State for all of my life, pretty much, except a very brief stint in New Jersey, which we don't want to talk about that. But I'm here to, on behalf of myself as a citizen of this great state and as a leader in the Atlantic chapter of the Sierra Club. And I want to thank you for setting up these hearings, having them all across the state. Particularly glad that this hearing extended into the after-work hours, otherwise I would not have been able to present today. I want to talk, mainly I want to address the overarching goals, which are shown on page 20, I can't read it, 20 of the plan. It says, New York envisions a flexible and clean energy system that empowers residential customers, business, and communities to achieve the reliability and affordability they value. To achieve this, we will focus on the following 5 areas. Okay, so far so good. Goal number 1. Goal number 1 must be to address the crisis of climate change. Must be. Time is running out, for gentlemen and ladies. We have maybe 20 years to change the curve. 2013, we hit 2 benchmarks. One was that we have put more carbon dioxide into the air than ever before. And the other is that we have hit 400 parts per million. Scientists say that 350 is a number that we can live with. We are now 50 parts per million past that. We're careening off the cliff here. 450, that's when the scientists say we're hitting a danger zone. 600, we're over the cliff. We're going 2 parts per million per year. Do the math. Speaking of math, we must decrease our reliance on fossil fuels. I recommend to you, issue priority number 1 has got to be decrease our reliance on fossil fuels. 50%, and I'm sure you folks know the numbers better than I do, 50% of our electricity comes from fossil fuels. We need to make 100% of our electricity from fossil fuel-free sources. We need to move to renewables. I know New York State has some wonderful incentives, programs in place to encourage solar power, wind power, which is great. And we're seeing development along those lines. We're seeing wind farms upstate New York. We've got more and more photovoltaics. The report talks about the large increase, but we've got to do more. There's this human condition, human psyche of inertia. I plead guilty myself. I've got natural gas heating my house. I've got a car which consumes gasoline. We need an all-out campaign to convince people to change. We've got to change. We've got to change fast. I would like to have a world that my kids can look forward to living in. I hear from parents about how their children are not having children because they're scared. They are scared. It doesn't look good. We've got more and more storms. Greenland is melting. The North Pole is disappearing. It will be open water in a matter of a couple decades. World government's already preparing for that, looking for oil, looking for the new military landscape because of movement of ships.
Sir,
Anyway, that's...
I don't want to interrupt, but I
Yeah.
will. I know we have a hard stop at 7, and we just had another speaker show up. I just wanted to make you aware of it.
Okay.
Thank you.
So, duly noted. I also want to recommend to you that goal number 2 should be that New York State is independent. In other words, that it is self-reliant for power. We don't import power, we make our own power. So let's not import power from Canada. Let's not rely on importation from Ohio, from coal plants. Let's do it ourselves. And of course, that means renewables, wind, solar. We've got to push that as hard and as fast as possible. Number 3, more resilient and flexible power grid. Great, do it. I highly endorse it. Thank you for putting that there. Giving customers more control over their energy use. Again, great goal. Keep it. Aligning energy innovation with market demand. I'm not sure what that means. But I would add that we also have got to consider nuclear power as something that is going to go away. It is just too expensive. It's not a fossil fuel source, but those plants are old and they're going to phase out. And so again, we need to ramp up and put in more wind, more solar. Iowa's got 25% of its energy, of its electricity from wind. Denmark, Germany, great examples, photovoltaics and wind. Japan, in the face of Fukushima, has decided to turn up the crank, and they are going full bore on installation of photovoltaics. Let's do it here in New York. Let's do it here. Thank you.
Thank you very much, sir. You're on. Aaron Carr? Thank you, sir.
All right, thank you for the opportunity. I know it's been a long day, I'm sure, for you, so I'll try to keep it quick here. I'm a student here at ESF, and I'm studying renewable energy, and I see through the studies that there's a way to do this that will work. We can get ourselves off of fossil fuels. The energy plan that you have does not change business as usual. We're not providing a path to clean energy. Instead, we're investing in a dying resource base. Wind has an amazing potential here in New York. Let's get on board with innovative states in this regard, such as Texas. They have a slightly better wind resource base, and they're maximizing its potential. We can do the same. Solar is also a viable resource here in New York. New York City is full of rooftops and skyscrapers that could effectively use solar where it is most effective to cool the very same buildings that they are attached to. In the summer, when the resource is at its best. Again, maximize potential. Biomass energy is also a good option. While some of my environmentalist counterparts may disagree on this, it's up in the air, I'm sure, there is a way to maximize this resource as well. Energy crops can be grown on marginal farmland, and our forestry and silviculture practices have improved to where we can manage our forests in a sustainable manner. When biomass is used in a combined heat and power system, efficiency is very good, and modern technology provides highly efficient, clean-burning boiler systems. Another way to look at energy crops is that carbon is sequestered in the growing and released in the burning. While I understand that this is not necessarily carbon neutral, as there is inherent harvesting and transportation carbon costs as well, it is still much better option than mined resources. Mined resources such as fracking or tar sands are a clear case of selling these projects and as as jobs and energy security to the U.S. citizens, when in reality the objective is profit for the investors. While there will be some benefit from the jobs created, they are all temporary. This benefit will dry up over the subsequent 1 to 2 decades. That leaves our children and subsequent generations with no benefit from these type of projects. Our brothers, sisters, neighbors, children, and grandchildren are the people we should be considering when we plan our energy future. The proposed plan relies on more natural gas infrastructure, especially to heat our homes. The only way to provide this fuel source is to import fracked gas or begin fracking in our backyards. This industry is very dangerous and can easily be compared to the gold boom in the 1800s or other type of mineral booms. For any boom, there is a consequential bust, which equals busted towns and broken communities that mining has consistently left behind. The destruction to the earth and water where extraction is happening is devastating to the local communities which are affected. The scar this leaves on our state is irreparable. The 10 to 20 years worth of productivity will take hundreds of years to superficially repair, and the effect of these fuels to our atmosphere could be the tipping point in climate change. We are hovering on dangerous ground. The energy needed to construct the infrastructure and extract the resources, coupled with the eventual burning of said resource, will be felt in our climate change story. The money and investment potential is much better suited to invest in sustainable use of renewable technology. Renewable energy may cost as much in energy terms as fracking. The difference is that the jobs are sustainable. The destruction left behind is minimal, and the communities affected will benefit and strengthen for generations to come as a result of the infrastructure. Our society needs to change the way we think. Band-aids and quick fixes are very short-sighted and do not address the root of the problems. Our fossil fuel resources have an important role to play in the transition to renewable energy. Sooner or later, we will have to switch. Fossil fuels are limited. Let's use these fossil fuel resources that we have, the infrastructure that's here right now. Don't expand it anymore. Don't bring more in. Let's use this efficiently as possible in direct relation to growing renewable energy, not squander those resources in irreparable ways. It's time to make responsible decisions about our energy future, decisions that consider where we stand as a society, and decisions that positively affect the future of our children and foster our responsibility as a race to care for our Mother Earth. Thank you
very much. So, do you have that, if you have that typed, or would you mind sharing it for the group? Thanks very much.
Yeah, thank you.
So, if there are no further speakers, thanks to all of us, to ESF, and thanks on behalf of the State Energy Planning Board, Jared, myself, and our 2 colleagues who managed to stay here through 6 of the hours, Mike Snyder and from Department of State, and Jim Brave from Ag and Markets. On behalf of all of us, we thank you very much, you the commenters, for your comments. You've made excellent points and given us much to think about. We have undertaken the development of the draft SEP with great seriousness, and it's extremely important that we hear comments and questions like yours as we move to a final state energy plan. Please remember that written comments can be submitted on our website until April 30, energyplan, one word, .ny.gov. Thank you very much. And I'm just sensitive to the fact that some folks have been told that the garage is closed sharply, so if anyone wants to